Oh, I'm sorry, public hearings. We have two public hearings tonight. The first public hearing is on Ordinance 037, 2023. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the ordinance?
Ordinance number 037, 2023. An ordinance changing the zoning of parcel numbers D08 105875 and D08 251110 in the city of Troy, Ohio from M2 to B2. These are the properties at 1511 and 1551 South Market.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. If you wish to speak on the ordinance, you are invited to come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Bradley Barner, 105 Crestwood. I am neither for nor against this ordinance.
Well then, Mr. Barringer, we're going to ask you to sit.
Okay.
This is a public hearing specifically on the ordinance.
I am speaking on the ordinance, Mr. Lutz, if I may do so. As I said, I'm neither for or against it, but I just have a couple questions regarding this ordinance, which, if you wish me to, I will hold off until later on in the meeting, if that is your desire.
This is not a time for questions and answers, Mr.
Okay,
Barringer.
thank you. I will hold off to the end of the meeting, Mr. Lutz.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wish to speak on the ordinance? Please come forward, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume. We will declare this public hearing closed. We'll move on to the second public hearing of the evening for Resolution R40, 2023. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the resolution?
Resolution R40, 2023. Resolution adopting the budget of the City of Troy, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. If you wish to speak on the public hearing for this resolution, you're invited to come forward. Please give your name and address and take as much time as you wish to consume. Seeing no one come forward, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Mrs. Knight, will you please read a summary of the minutes of the June 19th meeting of Troy City Council?
Minutes of Council, June 19, 2023. Council adjourned into executive session at 7:03 p.m., returned at 7:55 p.m. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended legislation be prepared to extend the moratorium on applications for self-storage facilities. Committee regarding ordinance number 028, 2023 recommended that the ordinance be amended to have the rezoning be to AR, Agricultural Residential District. Finance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared amending ordinances to establish a fee of $5 per month in addition to the monthly fee established for refuse collection and recycling for a 96-gallon refuse tote. Law and Orders Committee reported regarding a liquor permit application by Megumi Hibachi. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing bidding for the 2023 sidewalk replacement program. Committee recommended that their legislation be prepared regarding the West Main Street Improvement Project for an appropriation of a property at parcel number D08 099900. Personnel Committee recommended regarding reappointments to the City Beautification Committee, and by unanimous approval of a motion, all those reappointments and appointments were approved. Regarding ordinance resolution number R38, 2023, there were comments, and also regarding ordinance number 028, 2023. Resolution number R38, 2023, accept the donation of real property, was given second title reading and failed the motion to postpone indefinitely. Motion failed for lack of a second. Resolution number R39, 2023, contract for Phase 15, a sidewalk program, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 028, 2023, changing the zoning of 58.093 acres from A2 to R5, was given third title reading. There was a motion to amend the ordinance to have the zoning be to AR, Agricultural Residential. It was discussed and the motion was approved, the ordinance amended. Ordinance number 034, 2023, a petition for appropriation of certain property associated with the West Main Street Improvement Project was given first reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 035, 2023, imposing a moratorium for a period of 90 days regarding new self-storage facility permits was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 036, 2023, amending the ordinances to establish an additional $5 fee for a large refuse tote, was given first title reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 037, 2023, a rezoning of property on parcels number D08-105875 and D08-251110 was given first reading. Following various comments, council adjourned at 8:49 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. House councilors dispose of the minutes this evening.
Move to approve. Second.
So moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed? Yes. Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Silling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall? Yes. The minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the minutes of the June 26, 2023 special meeting of Troy City Council?
Minutes of council, June 26, 2023. The special notice meeting was read and acknowledged. Council recessed into executive session and then returned from executive session at 6:53 p.m. Resolution number R38, 2023, accept donation of real property, was given third reading, and resolution failed adoption. Council then adjourned at 6:55 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. House council wishes to dispense with the minutes.
Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed? Yes. Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall? Yes. Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We have a number of committee reports this evening. We'll begin with the Buildings and Utilities Committee, and Mrs. Marshall.
All right, this committee met 26 to consider authorizing bidding for the Police Department fluid cooler and pump replacement project. The project is the second step in replacing the building's cooling tower system, which is original to the building. The design estimate exceeds the budget amount, however, funds would be available from appropriations. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Police Department fluid cooler and pump replacement project at a cost not to exceed $260,000. Respectfully submitted by Mr. Twist, Mr. Whidden, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll move to the Community and Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Schilling.
Thank you. This committee met June 26th to review a recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that the final record plan of the Troy Storage Inns of America plan development, Industry PD1, be approved as it conforms to the approved general plan and the final development plan. It is noted that the application for this PD1 was received prior to council establishing a moratorium on new self-storage facility applications. This committee supports the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission and recommends that legislation be prepared to approve the final record plan of the Troy Storage Inns of America Planned Development Industrial. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, move on to the Community Partnerships Committee and Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. On June 26th, this committee met to consider council authorization of two agreements for events August 25th and 26th, Tour de Donut and Donut Jam. Both events include the use of public property, and one includes the use of public property for the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages. The authorizations will include the notwithstanding language. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared to authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter an agreement with Can't Stop Running Company related to the Tour de Donut event. Authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into an agreement with Troy Main Street related to the Donut Jam event and include the hours for the sale of alcoholic beverages as stated in the detailed report. Included the standard notwithstanding legislation for such events. Committee supports emergency legislation so that the F2 liquor permit application can be submitted and details finalized for both agreements. This is respectfully submitted by Jeff Schilling, Todd Sievert, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we have 2 liquor permits to announce, and we'll have Mrs. Snee with the Law and Ordinance Committee do that right now.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the C1 and C2 liquor permits for Troy Station LLC, 1511 South Market Street. These are the C1 and C2 Trex permits recently approved by council. The permits are defined as C1, beer only in original sealed container for carryout only, and C2, wine and mixed beverages in sealed containers for carryout. The Troy Police Department has not recommended an objection or hearing request be filed. And also, the Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the new D2 liquor permit application of Bottle Number 121 LLC, doing business as The Cellar, 1600 West Main Street, Suite A. A D2 permit is defined as wine and mixed beverages for on-premises consumption or in original sealed containers for carryout only until 1 a.m. For the D2 permits, there's a permit quota of 14, currently 11 issued, 3 permits are available, and 3 applications on file. And the Troy Police Department has not recommended an objection or a hearing request be filed.
Thank you, Mrs. Snee.
Thank you.
We have one reappointment to the City Beautification Committee. We'll have that read by Mr. Pierce and the Personnel Committee.
Thank you. Mayor Oda has requested council concurrence of the reappointment of Cindy Winger to the City Beautification Committee. I move the council concurs with the reappointment of Cindy Winger to the City Beautification Committee for a term commencing July 1st, 2023 and running through June 30th, 2025.
I second that.
There's been a motion made for the reappointment to the City Beautification Committee made by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. It's now time for citizen comments for items on the agenda. We have 2 resolutions and 5 ordinances. If you wish to address council on any of those items, you're invited to come to the podium, give your name and address, and you have 2 minutes to address council. Mr. Kerber will be our timekeeper this evening. Seeing none, we'll move into resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R40, 2023.
Resolution number R40, 2023, resolution adopting the budget of the City of Troy, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R41, 2023.
Resolution number R41, 2023. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Police Department Fluid Cooler and Pump Replacement Project. This is at a cost not to exceed $260,000. First reading.
Move for suspension. Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll move on to ordinances. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the first ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-28, 2023?
Ordinance number O-28, 2023, an amended ordinance changing the zoning of 58.093 acres of in-lot 11550, parcel number D08-107388, in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of A2 General Agriculture to the city zoning of AR Agricultural Residential District. This reflects the amendment made at the last council meeting. This is the third reading.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Siebert, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-37, 2023?
Ordinance number O-37, 2023, an ordinance changing the zoning of parcel numbers D08-105875 and D08-251110 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from M2 Light Industrial District to B2 General Business District. These parcels are located at 1511 and 1551 South Market Street. This rezoning has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. This is a subject of the public hearing this evening, so it will be on the next committee meeting agenda, second reading.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight, and in consideration of tonight's public hearing, this will be laid over for a third reading to our next meeting. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-38, 2023?
Ordinance number O-38, 2023, ordinance accepting the final record plan of the Troy Storage Inns of America Plan Development Industrial PDI. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. This is the first reading.
Move for suspension.
It has been moved to suspend the three-reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three-reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-39, 2023?
Ordinance number O-39, 2023. Ordinance authorizing the use of public areas for the 2023 Tour de Donut event, notwithstanding conflicting provisions of the Troy codified ordinances, and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Can't Stop Running Co., therefore, and declaring an emergency. This is for the Tour de Donut event, scheduled for August 25th and 26th of this year. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three-reading rule by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three-reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-40, 2023?
Ordinance number O-40, 2023. Ordinance authorizing use of public areas for the 2023 Donut Jam event, notwithstanding conflicting provisions of the Troy codified ordinances, and further approving the use of an area for the sale of beer and wine, subject to the issuance of proper permits by the State of Ohio and procurement of liquor liability insurance, and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with Troy Main Street, Inc., therefore, and declaring an emergency. This is also for the events to be held August 25 and 26 of this year. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
So moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Sneed. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
No.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Will entertain a motion?
Motion to recess into executive session to confer with legal counsel concerning disputes that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second.
There is a motion to recess into executive session by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Sneed. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Motion is adopted.
We will recess into executive session and hope to be back soon.